Porsche will not join the Formula 1 grid in 2026 as it's believed to have ended its formal evaluation of a programme despite the championship still being of interest. The stars aligned for a while, then it seemed completely incompatible, and after more than 2 years of speculation, meetings, rule changes to make F1 more appealing, private and public declarations of interest, Porsche's F1 2026 prospects are all but dead. Porsche intended to enter F1 alongside Volkswagen Group's sister brand Audi as part of the new engine regulations. While Audi decided to commit to building its own F1 engine and concluded a deal to buy into the Sauber team, Porsche's talks with the likes of Red Bull and McLaren collapsed because Porsche wanted to buy either a significant or controlling stake. In the past, Porsche would probably have been successful with this approach. Who wouldn't want to partner one of the world's great car manufacturers with an illustrious motorsport history and an F1 itch to scratch? But Porsche's prospects to join the grid in 2026 have looked bleak ever since the Red Bull deal fell through, and we understand Porsche's focus is now on its existing motorsport programs instead. This includes a Works Formula E entry and a high-profile return to the top class at the Le Mans 24 Hours as part of the 963 hypercar project. Porsche still retains an interest in F1, but it will not have an entry or affiliation with a team in the medium term. The Red Bull discussions were Porsche's most high-profile effort to get it on the grid, as it lined up a 50% buy-in to the company that designs and builds Red Bull Racing's cars. That would also have given Porsche an engine supply, as Red Bull has created a new powertrains division to build its first ever in-house F1 engine. When the Red Bull talks fell apart last summer, Porsche insisted it was still assessing options to join the grid, but only by chasing a stake in an existing team, as it lacks the infrastructure to take on a solo engine project. That's why it wasn't among the manufacturers to formally register their interest in the engine rules for 2026, even though that wouldn't have constituted a binding entry. Starting a new team from scratch, with the FIA opening a process for up to 2 new teams to join from 2025, didn't appeal to Porsche either, due to the cost and infrastructure involved. Any Porsche deal beyond the Red Bull one would therefore likely have been limited to using the engine that Audi plans to design and build, and possibly run it in the Porsche name. It's unclear how many teams were formally approached, but we know McLaren had direct conversations with both Porsche and Audi. There were 2 key questions that any partner team needed to consider: what would Porsche offer, and what would have to be given up in return. In this case, Porsche's offer was the name, financial backing to support its ambitions, and some limited technical resources. In terms of personnel and facilities, the existing team would be providing the bulk of the infrastructure and human resources. But Porsche made it clear that a glorified sponsorship deal would not cut it. It wanted more control. So any team would almost certainly need to hand over influence and more. For Red Bull, this meant giving up 50% of its main F1 operation. For McLaren or Williams, it would have probably meant losing their iconic names. Giving up strategic independence, sacrificing heritage, whatever it would have taken, none of this appealed. Or rather, none of this was worth what Porsche was able to offer in return. This marks the end of the best opportunity F1 has had to bring Porsche back for the first time since a disastrous footwork partnership in 1991. Although the end of a formal evaluation of F1 doesn't preclude resuming the search for a partner team in the future, it's unlikely the timing will be as good as 2026 appeared to be. There are new car rules as well as the new engine, and the power unit will not feature the complicated and off-putting MGU-H either, which gives new competitors a better chance at taking on established teams and engine suppliers. Ironically, dropping the MGU-H and increasing the output from the MGU-K were decisions made precisely to get the likes of Porsche on board. When the initial decision to try to find a way to enter F1 was revealed last year, then VW CEO Herbert Diess said those factors meant it was probably the last chance for a decade to join the grid. Porsche ultimately underestimated what teams needed from a partner and overestimated what it had to offer. We can see that because after aiming so high with Red Bull, Porsche hasn't even managed to do anything with a smaller team like Audi has. This is either because Porsche didn't want to meet the financial demands, either in the investment price or in the investment then needed to improve the team, or because, again, what Porsche has to offer is not worth the sacrifices. Ultimately, the value of owning an F1 team has shifted, and the cost of a buy-in, even for a big manufacturer, is higher than people think. Teams are becoming profit-making entities. They are secure, valuable, and long-term, they have hope of greater sporting successes. Unless the deal is blindingly good, shareholders would rather retain control of a less competitive independent team on their terms. Porsche wasn't obliged to enter F1 just because it's been interested for a while, and it certainly didn't have to bend to an existing team's whim if it wasn't willing. But if the changes of recent years aren't enough to get Porsche to make F1 a priority, nothing will. The team cost cap, the removal of the MGUH and increased electrification, the engine cost cap, sustainable fuels, F1's US growth, fairer financial distribution, this was not all done for Porsche specifically, but it ticked all of Porsche's boxes. As we'll come to in more detail shortly, this shows Porsche was only interested in a convenient deal. That's why a Red Bull partnership was perfect. It gave Porsche a convenient route to a very successful entry by partnering one of F1's leading teams, which also happened to be already setting up its own engine program anyway. Porsche could have piggybacked onto that and cashed in on the championship's popularity boom. But it got greedy and opened the door for Ford to swoop in and steal the Red Bull partnership for itself in a pretty simple cash for branding deal that will include some minor technical input too, but no stake in Red Bull's F1 empire. And now Porsche's not only missed out on the best chance of a successful F1 program by joining forces with Red Bull, it's probably missed its best chance of ever entering F1 altogether. While Porsche exhibited a fresh example of a historically odd attitude to F1, its sister company Audi has shown the right way to go about getting involved. VW has at least achieved half its aim for 2026 with Audi's full works entry. Audi already owns 25% of Sauber as of this January, and that will gradually escalate to 75%, with current majority owner Finn Rausing set to retain a minority stake when the transaction is complete. This is a gradual exercise because Sauber currently runs as Alfa Romeo in F1 due to a sponsorship deal with the Italian brand and is powered by Ferrari engines until the end of 2025. So Audi was not only willing to put its money where its mouth is, it was willing to play the long game. The contrast with Porsche is stark. Audi identified its strategy of engine and team ownership, committed to spending what was required to get an engine facility up and running, and is paying hundreds of millions to buy a majority share of Sauber. Boom, works engine, works team secured. But this approach was too rich for Porsche's blood. Instead, it stuck to its unrealistic terms, cash for control of an existing entity, without presenting a stunning technical offer. But should we be surprised? Porsche has never treated F1 as a central strategy. It's always been an added luxury whenever it's been convenient to do it. Porsche's first foray into F1 in the 1960s came because it just happened to have a car and engine that could sort of work, then did one more year with a new car before deciding F1 wasn't good value for money. TAG paid for the 1980s engine project, which was the most successful example of Porsche in F1, and Porsche didn't even have the naming rights for it. Then Footwork paid for the disastrous and short-lived 1991 project. This modern near-miss has just evolved into the latest chapter in Porsche's uncommitted F1 history. And Porsche is the real loser from this because although it was a sought-after addition to the grid, F1 is still in a healthy place. Audi's joining, and Ford has been tempted back with the Red Bull partnership that Porsche could have had if it lowered its demands. Honda may yet choose to have another engine project in 2026 too, despite formally withdrawing from F1 in the meantime. And there are several entities that wish to enter a new team, which includes a car manufacturer, as General Motors has been tapped up to support Andretti's bid to join the grid under the Andretti Cadillac banner. Whether it's Audi, Red Bull, Honda or GM, these manufacturers all have F1 as a realistic option because they are to some degree or another in control of their own destiny. That's what Porsche ultimately lacked, and its failure to get onto the grid is not just a result of others refusing to accept Porsche's terms, it's Porsche not setting the right ones.